My name is Buggy. If you're seeing this, it means I actually did it. I actually made the booktube after recording a couple of videos. And if you see this, I probably already uploaded the introduction to my channel and to me. But if you get this first, then cool. If not, check out my intro really quick just so you can understand who I am and how I like to view books and what gets me into reading. Obviously, I'm just going to jump straight into our January books. I read a total of 3 books in January, and I'm going to start with my lowest rating up to my highest rating. And honestly, I was not expecting my ratings to be as they are, so I'm very excited to get into it with you. Today I also have some Emperor's Chai tea to help power me through. See you in the video. My first book, and the lowest rating book, and it was also the book that I read first, was my Soulless by Gail Carriger. Really quick to go over the trigger warnings on this book. There's going to be sexual content, torture in detail, there's violence, kidnapping, medical trauma, there's stalking, there's classism, there's body horror, body shaming, there's death, misogyny, blood, death of a parent, murder. There's one scene that has vomit. There's also significant religious bigotry, and it also mentions the Confederacy, which that in itself I'll be getting into. I list these things off. I swear this is not like a dark romance book. In fact, it's actually written mostly lightheartedly. But of course, trigger warnings are really important to mention. So if you don't want to hear about anything like that, skip to this time point in the video. All right, let's get into Soulless. So Soulless, I was recommended to by a friend who in the car would, take me around places and would have the audiobook of this playing. And I heard bits and pieces every once in a while, and I'd be like, this actually sounds pretty interesting to me. Why not give it a shot? So what this book is actually about is about this Victorian era steampunk style world, and it has vampires and werewolves and ghosts also tied into that. So Victorian vampire, werewolf, ghost, steampunk world. That is one of the things that you will see me talk about later, about what I did like about this book, was the fact that this universe was so fascinating to me. Including our main character, Alexia, who has no soul, hence the title, Soulless. So in this book, Alexia has no soul, which is relevant because usually immortals are measured by how much soul they have. Not getting into too much spoilers, but just basic premise of the first chapter. She has the ability where if she touches any supernatural, basically they lose their power and they become mortal again. This is really important for the plot, and this gets her kind of caught up in the center of a situation that spirals into the greater underbelly of what's actually going on in London with the supernaturals. Leaving it at that, this book is actually way more interesting than it appears. That actually is the first thing that I'm going to critique about this book is the cover. Number one, in a graphical standpoint, I don't like this. I'm not a fan. It's definitely a 2009 book, you know what I mean? But there's more to it than that of why I don't like the cover. My biggest proponent is, if you look very closely at this woman, she is directly described in the book as being a voluptuous woman in curves, and she is also described as being much darker. She's full, like she's half Italian, but having a skinny white woman on the cover, she looks darker in this lighting, but she's lighter than me. Having her on the cover when the main character was described as a darker complexion, larger woman, and this is what they put, is really weird to me. They do much better in the manga version. This does have a manga, and they do much better in the illustrated copy of this book, but because I'm collecting all of the books, spoiler alert, I will be reading the rest of the series. I wanted them all to match. So for me, I had to suck it up and pick out this one. Although I do have a small grievance because this one has a matte finish, but I've seen the second one in store. It's glossy, and I'm like, why? But anyways, that is my first critique, and this will go into more of why this trend with the representation in this book, but we'll get there. Going back to what I said about the Confederacy mentions in this book is, yeah, it takes place in Victorian England, but there's a throwaway little line or paragraph or two about the how the Americans deal with supernatural beings. So they mention that the US has a much more Protestant view on things, and for some reason Miss Gail decided that the supernaturals as a whole sided with the South in the US because of the Puritan views of the US to outcast and hunt the supernatural people. And this is a really unfortunate thing to see such an interesting novel fall into, is that confederate vampire trope. And there's an amazing video about this trope and why it's so problematic. And I'll tag that video below in the description because I really think that is an amazing video and it's something that we should be vigilant of in more supernatural style books, especially those that involve aging vampires and what they were doing during this time period. But anyways, it was just such a throwaway line. Like, it had no purpose except just to simply set more world building in the background. And it was so odd to me. I couldn't get past, I had to put the book down and message my friend, be like, this is such a weird thing to choose to do, because it really didn't make sense from a historical point, or at least in the history of, if the super religious Puritans of it would make for me more sense. The South would be the bigger proponent of hunting and hating the supernatural minority, right? Like that would make sense, instead of just saying, oh yeah, by the way, all supernatural side with the South. That's even weirder. That's weirder. I don't know. That really is what, unfortunately, is one of the biggest proponents of my issues with this book. I will say Gail has, and this is not me saying like, oh, this is a poor reflection on the author, but I've kind of peeked around Gail's Tumblr, and she actively tries to uplift queer and Black voices, and she constantly is posting about what Black authors she really is enjoying, especially within the steampunk genre. And so that's why that line threw me out of the loop so bad, was that it was just such a throwaway line, but it's more evidence about how these tropes and these influences of the confederate vampirism trope that you see in almost every vampire media is so easy to fall into. And it's something that, like I said, if we become vigilant about, it will be something we can prevent. But anyways, like I said, this is not me to dog on Gail for a book 15 years ago under the influence of what was at the, Anyways, my next criticism necessarily isn't really criticism, it's more so a personal preference, but it's still something that, this is my page, I'm going to talk about what it is. The world building is so fascinating. This steampunk, Victorian era, supernatural werewolves, vampires, and ghosts is fascinating to me. Like, that was such an interesting concept. That's what made me pick up the series, was like, this is actually so cool. I want to sink my teeth into this universe. And my grievance here is not the universe, it's that the book is very driven by the romance. That's some people's cup of tea. Mine's Emperor Chai right now. But the thing about this is that the universe is so fascinating that it felt at some times that the romance was so heavily centered in the story, it almost felt detriment. And I mean that also in in moments in the book that have serious time restraints of action and serious we have to do so, like shit's going down, we gotta pull up our pants and get fucking going and solving the problem. Instead we're getting handsy, we're getting bumping and grinding. And like I said, this is my personal, I'm not a really big romance reader. I mean, let me be clear. This book, as spicy as it was, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty hot. It was hot. Let me be blunt. Shit was hot. It was a little hot, okay? Anyways, but from a reader standpoint, tell me why we were sitting here getting handsy in times of great peril.
No, well, I have a few resources of my own.
Now's not the time for dick measuring, Stuart.
It's not even it was I couldn't even enjoy this the risque of it all, because it was just knowing in my mind, like, what else was in the middle of going on, like, right outside that fucking door, like, right what was going on in this situation. And I'm like, we don't have time for this. It, like, as a reader, I felt frustrated that we were sitting here bumping and grinding when, like, it was in times of peril, like immediate peril. That it was just like, please, can this be saved for later? Please. That, like, this seems like a silly, like, thing to say, but genuinely, if you've read this book, you understand what I mean. And I'm sure many of you also have sat here being like, why are we bumping and grinding while we're, like, in the middle of a situation? Like, it was just odd. It was odd, but, like, also, like, let's move on to my next critique. So, Soulless maybe is more written for that more, like, romantic-y style, but I don't really think so. It was more risk than the average novel at the time, I would say. But, and this is gonna sound arrogant. This next critique is gonna sound very arrogant, and I do not know how to say it in a way that doesn't make me sound pretentious as hell. Pretentious people burp, that's fine. But, how do I put this? The plot twist felt spoon fucking fed. It felt spoon fucking fed. And this is where it's gonna sound arrogant, I don't know if it's just me being in the game this long of reading, because I've spent my whole life reading and engaging with these. I love a good, like, mystery plot twist, so, like, I'm very well affirmed in identifying the hints early on. But it felt like the plot twist and, like, the big reveal was spoon fed at the very beginning of the book. Like, you kind of, like, already knew what the fuck was up. Like, it was spoon-fed to me once. I'd probably be like, that's an interesting thing to randomly mention. Okay. Spoon-fed to me a second time, and I'm like, okay, we're really setting it in stone, so that way people can't say it came out of nowhere. Third time, the plot twist was kind of, like, hinted at. I was like, dude, we get it. We get it. So, like, that's one of my small grievances, is that for an adult content book, it felt like a junior YA style of spoon feeding a plot twist to you to identify foreshadowing. The foreshadowing was hardly a shadow, it was a eclipse. Like, it, and it's so funny because I'm really bashing on it, but I'm like, I did enjoy the book, and I promise I will get to the point that I do enjoy the book. But I don't know if this really merits its own video. I think I'm saying everything I want to say here. There are some books from this month that I want to get into a deeper dive into an entire video by itself at some point. But Soulless is not one of them. It's fun. Forgive me. It's fun. I loved it. I enjoyed it. And I will be continuing the series. But there's a lot to critique here. There's a lot. I wish that it was a lot more subtle with its foreshadowing rather than feeling juvenile foreshadowing for an adult rated book. My final critique of this book, and this kind of plays into what I said before about its juvenileness, it's more so about the ending of the book. It, out of nowhere, like, the ending was good. Like, the climax and everything was great. It was the resolution that felt rushed. It felt like it skipped past such important things that I would have loved to have seen written out. It feels like the book was almost like, hey, you have less than 100 pages left. You have to fill in all of it within that. I'm like, why didn't we get a little more? This book, I think, genuinely could have benefited from an extra 100 pages or even 200 pages, just kind of really tying things up. I mean, I know there's, like, a series coming, but what they wrote in here felt just kind of, like, rushed. Like I said, that's the easiest way I can say it. I will say, unfortunately, also that some of the choices for, like, certain characters showing up at the end, and like I said, this is spoiler free, but I was like, it immediately took me out of, like, the reading vibe. It made me put down the book and just, like, literally rub my eyes together, because it was like, ain't no way this character is coming up out of nowhere right after the climax to just be like, good job. Like, I was like, where did you fucking come from? Why would you just show up?
Okay, I pull up, hop out at the after party. You and all your friends say they love to get naughty.
Like, it felt really juvenile. It felt juvenile. Like, this book I have so many opinions on with full love. with full love. Like it's very weird. I'm very attached while understanding that this is not necessarily peak content. But you know what? I loved it, and that's what matters. And I'll get into that again. Like I said, keep saying that. I just want to clarify that this is not me ragging on this book. I genuinely went digging through Tumblr trying to find anyone talking about this book because I was like, someone please talk to me about this book. Like, I was like, we just got like a couple of like a small paragraph saying prior to what happened. I'm like, why couldn't we have seen that? I would have loved to have seen this event written out. Like I said, if I was just given 100 more pages to just go through these scenes of wrapping up the ending, because that's some of the scenes they just excluded felt like they would have been so much better to actually read rather than just being told that it happened. Show, not tell, at the end of the book is my biggest grievance. Now I can get down to what I really like about this book. Okay, I keep saying it, but I really, 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 really like the premise of the universe. I think that, you know, vampires, werewolves can be kind of overdone. I like the unique take on them in this. Well, it's not really like unique, but I like the tie-in of like how we measurement of souls. And I also like the setting. I think vampires and werewolves in like the urban/modern context is really over fucking done. Like, I'm tired. You're tired. We're all tired because it's the same shit.
Release me! Release me!
Set in a steampunk Victorian world, it adds new layers. It adds, environment changes character. Environment changes how you're going to act and react and think and what choices you make. I will say that the steampunk aspect of this book, it definitely kicks in way later on. And I am under the assumption that as the series continues, we're going to get more focus on that aspect of this world and this universe. But in the beginning, you could honestly just take it as like a classic Victorian novel. And it just, as you further unravel the mystery, it becomes more steampunkish. Which, like I said, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but I absolutely loved the universe. And that's what's driving me forward. It's like, if I get more papa, me want more universe. You know what I mean? So overall, going over everything else, the characters. This is also what's keeping me going forward with this series. Alexia, even if she's like not properly portrayed on the cover, oh my gosh. Thank you for having a main character who's actually fucking smart. I think the biggest thing that, if you're an author, look at me in the eyes. I need the woman and the protagonist to be smarter than me as a reader. Yes. Having a competent fucking woman is the best thing in the world. Alexia is so fucking intelligent. She is not passive in her story, but she doesn't come off Mary Sue either. She doesn't come off like, I don't need help. She gets in a couple of situations where she does need help, but like, she's intelligent. She's finding solutions to her problems on her own. She's competent. She's intelligent. And I'm trying to find ways to just talk about like that without spoiling, but oh my God, it feels so good to have a main character who's actually standing on 2 feet and who understands their universe too. Like, some main characters in books feel like they literally don't know where the fuck they are. I'm like, you've been here your whole fucking life. I'm new. Why are we both fucking confused on what's going on? She's intelligent. She's smart. She's witty. I love that about her. She's so fucking clever. Clever. That is the word. She's so fucking good. And especially because, like I said, she's described in what should be a larger bodied woman who's a little more tanner. She was just such a fun fucking character to read. I absolutely love Alexia, and I am desperate to see where she goes. That's what's driving me forward, is the fact that our protagonist is so fucking compelling. I don't know, maybe it's just because I grew up reading a lot of books and I'm getting back into reading, so I haven't really seen what authors been up to, but a competent female protagonist is fucking revolutionary to my mind. So that is one of the things I really liked about this book. My final note about Soulless, because I realized I've been yapping about this damn thing, is the writing style. It was entertaining. It wasn't, like I said, this is not high literature. This is not, this is not a certified classic, but it is certified fun to me. I liked it. It was fun. It was witty. I enjoyed reading it. Good. I liked it. Yes, it has fucking problems, but regardless, it filled me with great happiness. Like I said, my rating for this book was a 3.75. That's really fucking generous. I might put that to a 3.5. Maybe a 3.25. I was filled with so much whimsy. And it's like when you rate a book, you sometimes rate it way higher when you finish the book because you're like, wow, yeah. Reflectively, maybe we're actually sitting at like a 3.5. 3.5. Yeah, that's what we're staying. 3.5. I'll have to fix that on my story graph. Really fun universe, fun characters. Has some issues with both the plot being spoon-fed and some weird choices. That's what brings the score down. But I recommend this book. It's really fun. If you're just looking for something that has a unique universe and has a little bit of risque to it, please check out Soulless. You're gonna notice that I'm not holding anything. My second book, my second highest rated book of January 2025 was an audiobook. So for me personally, I'm not a fan of audiobooks. Don't judge me. I'm not saying I've never had the opinion that audiobooks aren't reading, but I personally audiobooks don't click in my head like that. The Murderbot Diaries, All Systems Red, it changed my mind. And you know what? I really enjoyed it. I recommend the one that I listened to, which is Kevin R. Free. Perfect tone, perfect dictation when he spoke, perfect everything. I really enjoyed it. And I think that's what made me really love this series was his version of Murderbot was very funny and his line delivery was phenomenal. This is another book that I listened to in the car with my friend and I was like, we're actually all going to listen to this one together. We're not going to make the same mistakes. So for me, I am not normally a fan of this style of writing where the book, let me put it straight. Murderbot Diaries is not meant to be taken super seriously. It is such a fun read that like the joy of it makes you kind of overlook all of its problems. I'll get into some of the problems that I did pick up on though, but I just want to clarify that this book is whimsy. It's whimsy. It's fun. Let me get into it. Trigger warnings for Murderbot Diaries is violence, gun violence, murder, injury detail. It's going to be death, blood, medical content. If you don't want to hear any of that, go to this timestamp and I'll see you there. So, getting into Murderbot Diaries. Actually, you know, after reading the steampunk, and I didn't think I'd like steampunked, I liked it. Same thing with sci-fi. I did not think I'd be a sci-fi fan. But because I enjoyed Murderbot so much, I'm now picking up more sci-fi books. In fact, like I said, I went and picked up some more. But alas, not what today's video is about. It is staying on task. Martha Wells did an excellent job with this story just because the rogue, like I said, I'm going to get into a little bit of the plot without spoiler. It's about, you know, that expected story of a rogue bot and having this robot trying to assimilate into what normalcy is for this universe and like humans being human. Martha Wells took it and made it really fun and thrilling and interesting. So like I said, it's such a trope that is kind of like overdone, but Martha Wells made it fun. Murderbot was so funny and compelling, and in a way, it's weird to say, but Murderbot was relatable. And I say that the hard part wasn't getting used to killing people as a murder bot. It was trying to adapt to acting like a human. And I think that's really funny. So that was one of my favorite aspects. Connecting to the universe of Murderbot was also really fun because there's a certain way of assumptions versus expectations within sci-fi. So there's usually a lot of sci-fi books bank on the fact that you have an understanding of sci-fi and that they shouldn't have to explain certain topics to you. Like if they say certain things and certain words, you can kind of just connect the dots in your head of okay, this is the application of this to this. Like if I, transport bot, if I talk about, scanners, if I talk about, drones, like your mind kind of already has instilled just from your education and from being a reader and watching shows, like our society culturally has a great assumption of what a sci-fi future looks like. And a lot of sci-fi books bank on that. Not many deviate because of two reasons. Number one, introducing someone to an extremely new and unique universe can take a lot of time, and a lot of authors who aren't brave enough, not saying that this is a bad thing. Some of the best sci-fi books out there really tackled it with a whole new context and a whole different thing. But trying to set people up to actually understand the universe and understand what's going on can be kind of difficult, and it can be very wordy, and a lot of authors get scared and they run away and they run back to what we know. So Martha Wells, the universe felt not only like that classic capitalist dystopian like future, but it also like was very interesting and fun. I liked the aspect of the sect units versus the humans versus the augmented humans. Like it was very interesting to see the different types of people and characters we're going to see in the story. Like I said, I really enjoyed it, and it didn't feel necessarily like a copy paste, but it felt like a universe that you could comfortably understand and comprehend based on what you already know about the sci-fi genre, if that makes sense. Like if you've never read sci-fi, I personally haven't really read that much sci-fi, but Murderbot was super easy to kind of like jump into and just be like, yeah, facts, Murderbot, you're right, this is true. You know what I mean? The sci-fi genre also usually commands a lot of seriousness, and that's also, I think, what really made me enjoy this book was the fact that the book didn't take itself seriously. Murderbot didn't take himself seriously. Like, I cannot stress enough that this book is for fun. And I mean, all books are for fun. Not all books, but it was such a joy reading. It was very amusing. It put me in a good mood reading it because I would chuckle. I'd chuckle myself. I'd smile. I'd smirk. But my biggest criticism of this book is its shortness. If you've seen a physical copy of Murderbot, it's like tiny as hell. So there's not a lot to it, right? There is more books. There's like, 8 books now. But the fact that the first book, how do I put this in a nice way? It's short and the climax is disappointing. I said it. The book has such good build-up. It has such good characters. It has such a good connection. And then the actual climax of the story, I feel, falls extremely short. It's very, very short-lived and very... For all of the weight that the rising action gave, the climax felt very bland. It felt very... There you go. You know what I mean? So, while I wasn't really happy with how the conflict was resolved and, what happened in the final conflict, it was still super fun. And I think moving forward, the stakes will get higher, and I hope, because I'm in the middle of the second one, spoiler alert, I'm in the middle of the second book, but that, it's just so sad to say that I did not like the climax for that book. It felt just so plain compared to the uniqueness of the world and how much information we were given and all these different pieces, that it was just bland. Like, the main antagonist felt so imposing, it felt so terrifying, that to have it end in such a way was like, oh. You know what I mean? Here's the thing, even with all that information, even with that disappointing, I still gave this book 4.25. Murderbot Diaries, All Systems Red, 4.25. Witty, funny, likable main character growth. We have such a unique world. I take away an entire star and more than a half away for the mere fact that just, damn, this shit was short. And I mean, you can't really judge a story for being short because sometimes it's all an author wants to say. Like, that's all they want to say, and that's fine. Some of the best stories are short stories, right? The story was short, and the climax was really anticlimactic, you know what I mean? So, unfortunately, it's only a 4.25. Yes, I'm continuing the series. Yes, it's super fun. I'm excited. I'm already, like I said, I'm about like a third through the second book. Loving it as always. This one feels a lot slower. Let me not yap about this book until it's done. Let's not yap. Save the yap. But moving forward to my final book of January, the one I'm so excited to share with you guys. This one. If there's any... Listen. I don't want to say... It is January, so I can't really say what are going to be my favorite books. But I am moving forward, almost knowing in my heart that this book, from the impact it has had on me, it will definitely be in my top 5 books of the year. Like, I can almost guarantee. If not, when I post that video in December, my top 5 books of the year, come leave a comment and be like, liar. Do the little pointy finger, do the little like finger emoji and be like, liar, liar. All right, the book that I'm talking about in the first place is, of course, The Mountain in the Sea.
One thing I'm going to note is that this book was so good, it's going to get its own video entirely in the future, so if my thoughts seem really discombobulated, it was from both the extended recording period, but also the fact that I knew in my mind that a more articulated version of my book review was coming. So just keep that in mind, this is more of just gently touching on the book as a whole.
It's normally a compliment to say that you couldn't put a book down. For The Mountain in the Sea, for me, it's the exact opposite. The Mountain in the Sea constantly made me put this book down and think about what I just read. This book has changed fundamentally how I think about my communication with others and how I view other people. And it unironically has made me debate, like, do I want to keep eating octopus at all? Like, this book, I'm almost at a loss for words. Trigger warnings for The Mountain in the Sea is gun violence, slavery, violence, war, injury details. There is animal death, suicide thoughts, vomit, medical content, suicide attempt, murder, deportation. Like, that is the best description I could give. That is technically what it is. So I want to make sure the trigger warnings are given properly. And of course, self-harm and alcohol mentioned in this book.
There's no real way to label this one trigger, but it can be triggering. So just so you know, there is a character who talks about their past of having feelings for someone, and that person ended up wanting to do stuff with them physically, and they do stuff physically, but the person doesn't actually reciprocate feelings at all, and they pretend like it never happened afterward. So if that's triggering, that's something you should keep in mind as well.
Future, Kong Dao, and it's basically about researchers going to this island to study this new species of octopus that they think are developing a form of communication. And that is such a simple fucking explanation. When I put this book on my TBR about a year ago, the description of it seemed interesting enough. I just want to show off. Look! This is the symbols from the octopus. But I can't even begin to explain, like, the plot of this book in a genuine manner. Like, what I just said about, like, that doesn't even scratch the fucking surface. That don't even scratch the fucking surface. This book is insane. It is insane. Starting with the world building of this universe, like I said, it's set in in a not so far future, but it definitely is still. I still say it's sci-fi. Mind you, this is Mr. Ray's debut album. He has another debut book. He has another book that shit's sitting on my TBR immediately. This book was so good. Anything this man puts out, I'm chugging. I'm shotgunning the fucking can of beer. This shit was so fucking good. And I am coming off like I'm just screaming about this book, but it's such an intelligent book. But let's break it down. The world building. Like I said, it's in a dystopian, and it feels like a very real future that could happen. Like this slightly sci-fi dystopian future, very capitalist driven, and it tackles with themes that are real to today as well. It just kind of puts it on a scale a little larger. We follow 3 different viewpoints necessarily, and then there's characters within those viewpoints. I found, like I said, the realism of the book, even with it being like a futuristic almost book, felt so understandable. Like while Murderbot Diaries felt like very sci-fi and that like you kind of piece together from just assumptions about the sci-fi genre, this book you had a lot more effort in puzzling together what the universe was, what was happening in this world, what had happened in this world, what the technology was in this world. So going into the characters, I love the cast. It's an extremely diverse cast. In fact, I think from just how I was interpreting descriptions and how I was interpreting locations, there's not a single white person in this book. It mostly takes place in Vietnam. So if you like that kind of setting, pretty good. It's a decentralized book, which I also really, really appreciated it, and it has canon non-binary characters. So if that's something you're looking out for, really diverse book, but also just so fucking intelligent. Wow. Continuing with my thoughts on it. Like I said, I believe this book has fundamentally changed my viewpoints on things. I can't express enough that it's such an intelligent thing. I will read one excerpt. Communication is not what sets humans apart. All life communicates at a level sufficient for its survival. Animal and even plant communications are, in fact, highly sophisticated. But what makes humans different is symbols, letters, and words that can be arranged in the self-referential sets we call language. Using symbols, we can detach communication from its direct relation to things present around us. We can speak with one another about things not here and now. We can tell stories, tradition, myth, history, culture. These are storage systems for knowledge, and they are all products of the symbol. And the use of symbols is something we have not seen outside of our own species. Like, thinking about, like, just that made me just be like, damn. You know, like, maybe I'm silly, but this book has genuinely impacted me in how I consider language communication, and how I consider just, like, how different humans are to each other and yet not, and, like, how we got where we are. And that book deals with not only how we got where we are in the communication sense, but it talks about just, like there's other plot lines in this book that are involved. There's literally nothing I can say about this book that would sufficiently describe how it has affected me. I will move forward with so much more of a mindset of empathy towards other humans because of this book. This book genuinely has changed me as a person. This is my first book of the year that is 5 stars. January. First book is a 5-star. I genuinely also think that after finishing it, that a second read through will make everything kind of, you'll catch on to more. I don't know if I'm ready to even pick it up again. This book is going to sit not only on my shelf, but in my mind for years to come. Wow. This video may be a little scuffed. Maybe I yapped too much about certain books. I'm learning. I'm figuring it out. If you have any tips of what you liked about this video and what you think should be different for next video, let me know. I want to improve my content. I want to improve how I make videos. Sorry again for the lack of coherent script. My laptop died, so I just started raw dogging, talking about my feelings. But anyways, thank you so much for checking this out. What the heck, you're still here. Like I said, if you want to see what's going to happen and you want to see my other options of what I'm going to be reading, just let me know. Thank you so much for checking out my video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.